as a mom, you grow these children, right? It's something that you're very close with, and you want to do everything you can possibly to have good health for you and your child. Like, I feel like first time, it was like you're learning all the pregnancy stuff. Like, you're just going through a whole transition of being a new human in general, on top of growing a human. So that was hard. But, like, the second pregnancy, I aired way more caution than I did the first time, I feel like. Because I'm like, oh, I'm still this. I can still do this. I'm a woman. I can do it. Like, I just had that very big mindset the first time. The second time, I'm like, all right, I'm cutting out caffeine as much as I can. Getting off the truck earlier because I pushed myself way too hard, and I am not exposing myself to anything that can hurt my child. That's just kind of, the second time around was very different mindset with that stuff. Give me a catheter. Let's go.
I'm like, it's okay. I got it. I got it, guys. Oh, man.
I love it.
I love it. Oh, so let's dive into this. So, Korie, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? How'd you get in the EMS?
Oh, goodness. So I grew up in South Whitley, Indiana, very small town. We had a vocational program through Warsaw High School. So I was like, I think I want to be a lifeguard. I think I should get my EMT because that would be helpful. So I'm going to take an EMT class my senior year. So went to the classes, first clinical ride in Warsaw on, it was multi-township at the time. My first run was a cardiac arrest, and I jumped in the back. We started going. I said, whoa, this is cool. He didn't make it, but we still did the things. Get back in the truck. I'm like, I don't want to be a lifeguard anymore. I think I want to be an EMT. So I went through the classes. Got an A+. Teacher said, you should go to paramedic school. Said, good idea. So I did it. I was very young. I turned 21 in paramedic school. Couldn't work anywhere because nobody would let me drive at the time. And got my paramedic in 2012 and started my full-time job at TRA 2013. Worked EMS only until 2017. That's when I discovered fire and thought it was cool. Went through classes, got them. And began as the first female career firefighter paramedic for Northwest Fire District, which was formerly Huntertown.
Oh, wow.
So that's where I've been since then because it's just the best gig ever.
And so you went straight through, right? You went from EMT to paramedic.
I did.
Yeah, and I did that route too because I remember turning 21 also in paramedic school.
I was teaching you in paramedic school.
I know.
Which is so funny to sit here and think we both did the same thing. I got to watch you go through all the same, mindset. It's hard when you don't have time under your belt and you're having to learn all the things. And then, do it.
And then do it. Yeah.
And just do it. And you're thrown on the streets. So you started in TRA first too, right? So just a very busy system with a lot of things. It's
a lot.
A lot. Yeah.
It is a lot. All right. So we are here to talk about pregnancy, and specifically pregnancy while you're on the job. I was pregnant when I was working at Adam, so I was just on the ambulance. Now, when you were pregnant, you were working on both.
Yes. So Northwest Fire District is a combination department. We not only run fire, but we are a paramedic level ambulance service. The paramedics on the shift are the ones that they take EMS runs when the EMS runs come in. And then if a fire run comes in and you're not busy on the ambulance, you're on the engine doing the fire calls as well.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit. When you first found out you were pregnant, and we're going to dive into a lot of stuff here, talking about how to stay safe in policy and stuff like that. But I just really want to hit what it was like to be pregnant on the rig.
First time being pregnant, it was not exactly planned. It's not like we were preventing, but we also weren't necessarily trying.
Yeah, because you had your wedding, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I found out I was pregnant, it was 2 weeks before that I had bought my wedding dress. And when I tested, because I just felt weird, and I thought I still had COVID, because I also had COVID at the time, I tested just because I had one in my drawer, and turns out it was positive. I did the math in my head when I found out I was pregnant, and walked into where my husband was at, and I said, my wedding dress is not going to fit. And I started crying.
Aww.
Which I got another one, obviously, and it was beautiful and I loved it. Yeah. But it just the whole mindset of, oh my gosh, this is happening now. How am I going to tell my chief, my captain, my partner. Like, how am I going to say this without, I feel like I'm going to be babied because I'm the only woman on the shift and I just don't know what's going to happen. So I remember the day I walked in to tell them, and my stomach hurt so bad. I had morning sickness really bad, like with my first. So we all had this routine where we would go and sit and have a cup of coffee together at the picnic table before we checked trucks off and just talked about our days off and whatnot. And we normally would drink like 2 cups. So I wanted to just drink one to be a part of it, but I didn't want to drink a second one. My captain looks at me and goes, "Hey, need a topper?" And he went to go grab the cup of coffee and pour it in, or the, carafe of coffee. I said, "Oh, no, I think I'm good for now." And he looks at me, "What, are you pregnant?" And I just looked at him, and I looked at my chief, and they're like, "Oh, you're pregnant?" I'm like, "Yeah."
I feel like that didn't last long.
Yeah, that didn't go like I wanted to, but everybody was super happy and like, okay, so what do we have to do? Because when you think about it, how many women are getting pregnant in the fire service? There were no policies on what to do. I didn't know what to do. Never been pregnant before.
Yeah.
So it was just a very mysterious time for everybody because we just didn't know how to approach it the right way. So we just took it day by day for a while until we could kind of establish how we were going to move forward safely.
There's not a lot of agencies out there that have specifically pregnancy policies. They either loop you into like the long-term sick or they just kind of wing it. My agency, when I hid it for 4 months. And the funny stories I have of hiding this pregnancy, the throwing up in the supply closet, just hiding that I had morning sickness, almost throwing up on this little old lady when I went to go pick her up, just all of the things.
All
the things. But yeah, when I was like, "Hey, I'm pregnant," they're like, "What does it look like when I get really big and I can't operate on the ambulance?" They're like, "Well, let's hope that we have light duty for you. If not, you're just going to have to use your PTO." And I'm like, "Well, no."
No, hold on a minute. There has to be a better way than this. You would think, but the more you dig, what do you find?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. And just the amount of things that, like I said, the amount of things that happen, like when you're pregnant. And when did you decide to get off the rig?
So I will say my 2 pregnancies, because I've gone through 2 working this career. The first was very different from the second. The first, my chief was like, "Okay, we just need to keep in contact. Like, let me know how you're feeling. If you feel like you can't do something, we need to figure something out." At that point, we had our satellite station, which was up at Story Point North. They gave us an apartment to keep an ambulance on our east side because we were still in the process of building our Tonkel station. So that is where eventually, I think I was like 5 months pregnant, when I asked them if I could just stay EMS only because I slipped and fell on a fire scene. And I fell on my butt. I didn't get hurt, but that was enough for me to be like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this right now. Like, I can hardly walk like up a ramp without losing my balance, I guess. So because that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. It was wet and I slipped. Yeah. So I realized at that point, first pregnancy, not really knowing how you're doing or like just experiencing everything for the first time. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is not safe for me or baby. I need to move to ambulance only. I did that for another month before I stepped off completely because I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs without short of breath.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that fun not being able to breathe while you're pregnant. For me, my OB, I loved my OB. She did a lot as far as like checking up on me and stuff like that. And she knew I was the first person to come through that was like in emergency services. So she's like, "I don't really know what to go about this." She's like, "I'm going to kind of treat you like someone that weight lifts a little bit."
Okay. And I got the same thing.
Yeah. And she's like, "So if you're doing something and it hurts, stop it and we will figure it out." So for me, how I judged it was if I couldn't intubate anymore. So I would like go and get the head out every now and then, or like just sit down on the floor and be like, "Okay, head's roughly going to be like this. Okay, I can still intubate."
Yes, that was a big factor for me too, and I didn't think about it until I was in it, right? You don't intubate all the time in this business, at least a system that maybe is a little slower. I was around the same time, probably 5.5, 6 months pregnant with my first, and I had to intubate somebody in a front yard. They were on the ground. I got on the ground and went, "Oh, hold on a minute. Guys, you need to get them on the cot, lift their head. I can't do this. Like, I can't do this on my belly. I can't do this sitting down." my crew was so awesome. If I said I needed something or we needed to adjust a little bit, they were so good about helping me. But I remember that moment. I'm like, oh no, like nobody talks about this.
Yeah, no one talks about the struggles of being pregnant on the job. So we were doing a lot of long distance transfers to Indy. My crew loved them to pieces because they decided before I even did this and got the doctor's note that I was not taking any Indy transfers. They're like, hey, you're at this point. You can go at any time. We want you close.
Absolutely.
And I still got the doctor's note, which there was 2 other women that followed me in pregnancies, and that became a standard then to, hey, you reach a certain point, like you just don't go on those long distance transfers, because one of them actually did go, and she actually had like really bad contractions, like going down to Indy, and it scared her enough that she's like, hey, guess what? Like, no more Indy transfers for me.
I'm out.
And you just don't think about that, right?
No, you don't. Like accommodating to our business when we're 911, when everything is fluid, you have to roll with whatever you got. Like, how do you make a standard for that? Number one, you kind of have to be flexible and be able to do, like, as a boss, I guess is what I'm saying. You have to be able to let them do their job, but to a point, you have to make those sacrifices, like you guys not doing LDTs. Or I told them right away I really didn't want to go into a fire, but I was 100% willing to drive and operate, engineer fire trucks, lift the equipment I could lift, which was almost everything minus like extension ladders. That was a little hard for me pregnant, but I worked everything in my power to be able to do everything I could for my crew and not just be stuck at home.
Yeah.
So running the ambulance and engineering was my perfect modified duty position that I kind of rolled with the first time. But the second pregnancy, after I had to present an official job description for my midwives, they looked at my job description and said, this is what you do? I'm like, yeah, for the most part, this is what I've been doing for a while. And like you said, you were good with what I do normally. Like you said last time, they said, you're not fit for duty.
You're like, never mind.
Yeah, as soon as I actually had to do this professionally, they were like, oh no, this is not safe. And I said, okay, I respect that, but we need to come up with a plan then. So
yeah,
that was a whole other level of hurdles to jump through.
So Fire Rescue One had an article out, and this was published in 2020, that talks about issues with specifically firefighters in pregnancy.
Yes.
And so this one, it follows this woman that, she's 35, is trying to get pregnant. And she talks about how light duty, so she was 7 months pregnant and there was no light duty policy for her, right? Some statistics that I thought were interesting was, so female firefighters are 27% more likely to miscarry, which is higher than the average, which is 13%.
Correct.
Yeah.
Isn't that mind-blowing if you think about it? Nearly double.
Yeah.
What just normal citizens and humans that don't do this job. And miscarriages, you hear about them all the time. I feel like, I don't know if those studies, I don't know if they had anything recent, but I feel like you hear about those a lot. And then looking at the unique risks that we go through, right? As EMTs, we're exposed to, whatever people have in their homes that you don't know about. On the fire side, if you're not wearing proper SCBA and IDLH atmospheres, like you're exposed to all kinds of chemicals because when everything burns off, it just sends a slew of toxins in the air.
Yeah, and that was the one thing I thought was interesting as I was going through these 2 studies that I pulled, and the one, volunteer firefighters were at higher risk.
Yes.
And they identified it, it's because of equipment and training, right? You're a volunteer versus a career.
Maybe not provided with the most top of the line, safety features of equipment, like that kind of stuff, or maybe even proper training, depending on how often you train as a volunteer. There are more risks, I feel like.
And then not only is there a risk for miscarriage, premature birth is at 11 to 16%, which is higher than the national average at 10%.
It is.
Yes. And you know what? You can assume, or, like the study says, it's because of the, like you said, the toxins and the stress of the shift, the 24-hour shifts, right?
Yes.
That was extremely hard for me. I came from a 24/72.
You did 24s too, right? Yep.
Yeah, and you know about that third nighttime run, I'm like, I'm about ready to hurt someone.
I am done.
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't just, in fact, impact women. It impacts men too.
It does. There are huge studies. There's a lot of stuff out there showing that men's sperm counts, motility, all of that is affected by the same chemicals. And I think it is that article. It was Maia Brown. She was discussing how she was trying to figure out, like, studies about stuff because of her. It was the AMH levels, or your egg reserve count,
Yeah.
and why her egg reserve count was so low when she was just in her mid-30s. She's like, well, if this affects men this bad, it's got to affect us too. And that's where Sarah Janke and all of her studies and stuff have started to help prove a lot of those things with the AMH levels and whatnot.
And these studies, like, it's not like there's a boatload of them. There really isn't. Like this one that I pulled here, I was telling you, and I know you're like, I've read this one 1,000 times already. I'm like, it's just surveys. Like, they're just asking, they sent out 3,000 surveys to women that were in the fire service, and they're like, hey, answer this. And then they checked back with them, and like 5 years later, or a few years later,
It was
at
a few
least.
years at least.
Yeah, it was at least a few years later, and like that's how they got their numbers of, okay, like they have more miscarriages, they're having more
Preterm
births, issues, and then men, 50% of them have low sperm count or low mobility, and I'm like, well, I'm so happy, guys.
Yeah, it's really crazy. When you get into a career and you're young, I mean, that's kind of where I put myself with this career. I didn't really think that hard about having a family because I wasn't in that part of my life yet. But when we were, I was like, oh no, yeah, I probably should test and make sure everything's okay. I guess everything we're exposed to, who knows what's happening right now with hormones and egg count. Because once you lose your eggs, you're done, right?
Yeah.
You only get so many. So
you only get so many of those.
You only get so many of those. Those don't get recreated. So as a young woman going into the fire service, that's one thing I would suggest is making sure to stay on top of those fertility levels and watching. I have like a dream, and it's hopefully going to be a reality here in like the next 5 or 6 years. But I want to make a nonprofit, Women of the Badge, for this county and maybe surrounding if I can do it, where we can have that, be able to testing your blood after fires and stuff to be able to kind of learn what happens with our fertility and whatnot. I'm very passionate about this. That's why I'm talking to you today.
Yeah, I know.
But I always, if I find somebody in the county that's pregnant and they're in the fire service or EMS, I'm like, hey, let's chat about this. How are you doing? Do you feel like you're being taken care of? Do you feel safe? You know, how's your pregnancy going? I feel like we need to talk more about this. And if I can have an outlet or a nonprofit to help provide those tests and things, that's my dream. So hopefully one day I can do that. But right now with 2 littles and working, it's on the back burner, but it's there.
It's there, yeah. You're like, I'm always planting that seed. And for anyone out there like that is interested in helping out in that project, that would just be phenomenal, right? So that kind of brings me into one of the other reasons that we had you on here is you developed or developing a policy for your agency, and I want to know what that looks like.
Okay, so with baby number 2, I was told pretty quickly by midwives I was not allowed to work. Yeah. And the first thing I thought of, which I think a lot of people are like this these days, is, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for the bills? Like, we're a 2-income household. A lot of people are these days. I had to burn all my vacation days, and then I was going to be on short-term disability. Well, if you do the math, I think I was 14 or 15 weeks when I was told that I couldn't work anymore. I was like, well, my short-term disability is going to run out before I even have my child. And long-term disability, let's be honest, some of them are not very good at providing money. I think it was like you drop down to 40% of your pay, and that's nothing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, how are we going to fix this? And chatting with my chiefs, people that helped oversee my pregnancy, we all decided, well, maybe we can figure out a light duty option because we're still a smaller department. That was before we hired a lot of our people. We had to meet, I think we had 13 at the time. We had to meet like a certain level of people and things to be able to create this. I gave a lot of input about what I felt would be helpful, which for me at the time was working like 3 days a week and being able just to do office duties, help with cleaning, running errands, because there's a lot of errands that need to be run from station to station. I was willing to do anything to stay on payroll at an hourly rate just to make sure I can help with that. And they obliged. They were super helpful. They did a lot of stuff behind closed doors that I don't know, like with the creation of that policy, but I was able to help give guidance on what would be helpful for me. So we, with the trustee at the time, because we were still ran by a trustee at that point, we were able to make that happen with a light duty position. And now I know at least 2 other people have used it, not for pregnancy, but if they have gotten hurt and need to be in the office, they can. Yeah. So it's a 2-for-1 deal. It helps women who are pregnant. It also helps anybody who gets hurt.
Yes. And that's if, employers out there, if you do not have a policy in place, kind of like Adams, we didn't have one in place. And like you didn't have one in place. Like, it's better to be proactive than reactive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just think about, okay, like, how can I make this work before this happens? Or if you're one of those, like, I don't have a lot of females.
Right.
None of them
I'll worry about it when we get there. I've had so many people I've called asking for policies. They're like, oh, we don't have a female in the department. It's not something we need to worry about at this time. Okay.
Like, eventually it will.
We do make up 5% of America's firefighters. Women do, but that number is obviously growing. So
yeah, and that is without being able to identify. They say like the binary and the trans.
Correct.
Too, so
yeah, that's a whole other. I mean, yeah, our percentages are probably higher than 5%. That was just the last solid number we could get.
Yeah. And that brings me into, okay, so you developed this policy of light duty. Was there any circumstances of like, okay, when did you decide you get off the rig?
So that is a very personal decision, and it's going to have to be the woman and the OB or the midwife. Whoever oversees your pregnancy, you have to have a good communication with them about what you're comfortable with doing, how you're doing. It's a balance. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to hurt your baby, but you want to continue to work. I feel like a lot of people in this business, we are those type A personalities that want to continue to do our job and be successful, but also have to just figure it out. Yeah. So having that communication with them, legally, it has to be you and your OB or midwife to decide when you leave your work. It is not your employer's job to say, you need to leave now. If you can properly perform your job to the best of your ability and meet your standards, you can work. It is your choice to put yourself in those situations. Like the possibility of toxins and all those things, like that is your decision to weigh on whether you expose yourself or not. Like I was very vigilant on wearing SCBA. If I was anywhere near anything toxic, like fires and stuff, I would be on air longer than anybody else because I just wanted to make sure to not expose myself. Or like, how we have those sanitizing wipes for our cots that we get everywhere. They do cause cancer, if you touch them with your hands. A lot of people don't care. They just clean the cot with bare hands. I don't. I wear gloves, and I did throughout pregnancy just to help mitigate some of the chemicals I was ingesting through my skin. But the National Institute of Health, their lifting chart, what they suggest is that you can lift more than 51 pounds repeatedly up to 20 weeks of pregnancy. And then from 20 weeks to 24 weeks, they suggest your max lifting weight be 51 pounds. And then after 24 weeks, they suggest that your max lifting weight should be 24 pounds.
Huh.
So that kind of puts a damper in what you do because, right, we're lifting people, we're lifting heavy equipment, all this stuff. But again, with what your OB was saying, my midwives were like, oh, you've been doing this for a long time. You know how to move your body. You understand mechanics. As long as you feel safe, continue to do it. My first pregnancy, that's what they said.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of ran with. But I was interested to see that they had an actual chart out there that was like, hey, you shouldn't lift more than 24 pounds after 24 weeks. What? My child weighs more than that.
Yeah. That is interesting because, like I said, we're talking about, like, the deadlifting. They're like, oh, when you're working out, like, you never go up in weights. Like, you just stay wherever you got pregnant at. Mm-hmm. But you can work that until, like, you give birth. And it's like, okay,
I think there were only 2 or 3 times in all my pregnancies where I had to call for help, which my 3 guys, Derek, Nate, and Jeremy, were with my first pregnancy. They would come help me no matter what, like if I asked, but it was only 2 or 3 times that I had, hey, I really need an extra hand here. So.
Yeah. And we had, I shouldn't speak for you, I had a pretty healthy pregnancy.
I did too. If you have some symptoms that are maybe a little more problematic, as in hyperemesis, if you're puking a lot, morning sickness, gestational diabetes, hypertension, preeclampsia, all of these diagnoses could complicate you doing your job, right? Because they will take a little bit of extra care. You have to give yourself grace. You are a human growing a human right now when you're pregnant and working and doing all the things. It's just so much for your body. So listening to your body and facilitating what you need to. If it's gestational diabetes, making sure to have a really good nutritional diet. And if they give you meds, taking them or checking your sugars, making sure to watch that stuff. That can be different in our business, I could imagine. I also didn't have any of these issues. I had morning sickness and food aversions the first time, but I think it was your first pregnancy, you know. I couldn't even look at eggs, like raw eggs.
Yeah.
Nope. When we would go to work and eat, it's eggs, toast, and bacon, right? That's what we eat almost every shift. I had to walk out of the room when they would crack eggs. I couldn't even look at them, okay? It was mortifying, but that really boiled down to mineral and nutrition deficits, which is what I found after studying. So my second pregnancy, I focused really hard on minerals, eating meat. Like, honestly, that was the biggest thing, was just focusing on more of a meat-based diet, and that took away every symptom I had.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I couldn't do chicken. Like, I couldn't cook it. I could eat it. I just couldn't cook it.
The process of looking at it raw and cooking it?
Yeah, for some odd reason, that, like, messed me up.
Yep, I feel that wholeheartedly. Pork chops were mine. It was pork chops and eggs. there was no way.
Yeah, I'm not touching that. Sorry, Michael. You're going
to have to figure that out.
You're going to have to figure that out. Yeah.
So.
And that brings me to postpartum. Ooh, fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so, you go back, you just had a baby. Now, the biggest thing with this is breastfeeding.
Yes. It's a personal choice. And if you make it that far, I wish I did. So hard, I wish I did. Pumping in a 911 service, I can only imagine how that would be. I had it in my head how it would go, but, I never got to do it. But
I did it for a full year.
Full year?
It was interesting.
I was going to say, so you have to pump when you can, right? You try to stay on schedule because you don't want your supply to drop and, all that stuff. But you have to have a safe space to pump, right?
Yeah.
I've heard of a lot of different safe spaces, but according to federal law, it has to be a place that you can lock a door without a window or have a covering, and it cannot be a bathroom. Like, our locker rooms are attached to our bathrooms, so that didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
But when I did approach my chief about that, he said, absolutely, I have an office right here, this office down the hallway here. You can use that. We'll make sure to have a sign, and you can lock it, whatever you have to do. And then some policies that I have seen on the internet, fire departments would provide a little mini fridge to put your milk in if you felt weird about putting your milk in with, your shift fridge. I think the guys were a little weirded out thinking about it. I never did it, but I did have homemade creamer that I made in a mason jar one time, and I stuck it in the fridge. I didn't label it. And I had a guy come out with it. He's like, Korie, is this your breast milk? I'm like, no. No, actually, I'm not doing that. I appreciate you asking, but it's just coffee creamer.
Do you want some?
Yeah, you can have some. It's French vanilla because I make my own, so it's in a mason jar. But yeah. I think it freaks other people out. So just making sure to be clear, labeling stuff if you want to. But yeah, the federal law is called the Pump Act. You can look it up, and it'll tell you all the things that your employer must provide you. And I think it's 15 employees or more, they have to abide by that rule. If not, they have to do their best to accommodate. And my department has always been super accommodating, just doing whatever they can to help with that process.
Yeah, for me, I was lucky enough that I was trying to sit here and think about how would I do it when I used to work at TRAW. And I'm like, man, I'd probably just do a wearable pump. But at Adams, we had our own little room. So I just always had my stuff ready to go. And I did short sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And there was times that I had a go bag that if we had those transfers, I just crawl up the back and pump.
Hey.
And then just crawl back up front whenever we were done and just hanging out.
Yep.
And, women out there, if you've never experienced breastfeeding or you're thinking about it, just know that you don't always have to wash your pump parts.
Yeah, there's some rules that you figure out. I pumped about a month both times before it just was not viable anymore. Lip and tongue ties in children make breastfeeding very hard.
Ooh.
So, and I had that with both of my boys. But the both times I pumped, I had like 3 sets of pumps, like parts and things. And sometimes in the middle of the night ones were always the hardest because I didn't want to have to like clean everything. And, you're already sleep deprived. You need to sleep when you need to sleep. I would stick them in a Ziploc bag after I rinsed them and put them back in the fridge. And then I would go back and
get them again.
I mean, that I've read a lot of things about that being okay. I rolled with it because at the time it worked out. And then I would just clean it the second time. I always cleaned it the second time.
Yeah, and then, I did that too. I would clean it the second time. Also, you can let your milk set out for a little bit, and that was also nice because, like, I remember there's one time I went out on a fire run, and it, like, we stage and we're there forever.
We were there a long time.
So I just really quick went back, pumped, just set it out. And sometimes I'd bag it if I was really bored.
Oh, yeah, if you have that downtime, because some shifts are super crazy, and other shifts you don't do a thing.
And I did get one wearable pump.
Yeah, I had a wearable pump as well. I didn't like it as well, but it did work in pinches. Like if we were at families' houses or whatever, I always brought my wearable one.
Yeah. My favorite one was a nurse that told me to get one, and she's like, but don't get the one with the hole on the top, because she's like, I made that mistake, and I bent over to help a patient, and my milk just went all over him, and I'm like, oh no.
That's a solid problem.
That is. I was like, I don't know what I'd be more upset about, that I
lost your milk or spilled it on the patient.
Yeah. I'm like, well, hopefully she wasn't that mad about it.
Well, but yeah, I feel like I've heard of other women in other EMS-only services where they would come back to their home base to pump for 20 minutes. Like, they would shift their trucks. It wasn't TRA, it was a different one. But they would shift their trucks every so many hours to allow the pumping and then send them back out.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good accommodation, as long as you can somewhat stick to it. Have a truck cover your truck, and you pump for 15, 20 minutes, whatever you pump, and jump back out.
Yeah. And that brings me, so with breast milk, there's not a whole lot of studies on it. It's very limited, right? So they always err on the side of caution. But remember, breast milk is super fatty.
It is.
And are those toxins, those heavy toxins that you get when fighting a fire, love fat.
They do, and they attach,
They attach like no one's business.
It's insane. And you don't think about it until you're like, oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So, again, with the whole Women of the Badge dream, like testing blood to see what raises, what lowers, like figuring out how our hormones work. Another thing is testing breast milk to figure out maybe what specific chemicals are we pulling or being exposed to that are being in our breast milk and stuff. The stuff I saw was like you need to pump and dump for 72 hours just to ensure you're not feeding your child toxins.
Yeah. And this is any time that you have a chemical or just an exposure where you're like, it's very questionable, because we don't know how much is getting transferred to your kiddo.
Yep. And our skin is the biggest organ in our body, right?
Yeah.
And it's exposed to everything every day, and everything is normally passed through. So you have to be very vigilant on where you're at, what you're doing. And if you have a question, I would err on the side of caution and not give it, but that's just me.
Yeah. And then there's the other thing, coming back to work postpartum. If you had heavy postpartum bleeding, if you come back too soon before you're fully healed, that can cause issues. And then you have your pelvic floor.
Oh, yeah, the stuff that nobody talks about?
Yes, that stuff.
Oh, my goodness. So first time coming back, I did not focus much on pelvic floor. I honestly just didn't feel very educated about it until I started having issues, which I found very quickly. After having to lift heavier things, moving patients, I noticed, I was like, oh, I think I should maybe find a doctor or somebody to talk to because this doesn't seem normal. and was able to be educated and go through a whole pelvic floor therapy, and that helped a lot with just being able to do my job without having to worry about symptoms that were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And for women out there, like, what are some symptoms to be concerned of? I'll be like, hey, I need to.
Well, to be quite honest, and I'm nothing but, whenever your pelvic floor, you carried a baby and everything's shifting and going back to normal, when you lift, I had a lot of issues with basically peeing my pants. Like, I didn't have control of my bladder. I also felt a lot of tightness in my lower abdomen that was painful, and it didn't feel right. Like, I'm like, okay, I've been out 12, 13 weeks. Why am I still feeling this? And like, losing control of your bladder is very not only uncomfortable, but like in the middle of a fire run, that's when I figured it out. I lifted a big fan and realized, oh no, like, I didn't even notice what's wrong with my body. Why am I not stopping it? I'm an adult, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of weird stuff that you just don't get told about. I mean, I went through a midwife group, which I felt like is very holistic and really big on your body, but they didn't talk about it much either. I'm like, I had to go back and find a therapist to be able to like go through the different exercises to be able to help strengthen your pelvic floor. Deep breathing and really focusing on core work helped a lot.
That is not normal. Peeing your pants when laughing.
Yeah, all the things, moving, jumping, lifting, not normal.
That is not normal. And I don't know how many times, like when I was pregnant and people were like, oh, just wait until you giggle and you pee your pants. And I'm like, I feel like that shouldn't happen.
That has very much been brushed off because they think it's normal, and it's not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I'm like, hey, there's a quick fix to this. There is a fix to this.
It does take patience, time, and commitment, but there is there is a fix to this.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen to everyone. Like, I haven't had that issues with my first. I mean, who knows? With my second, I'd probably actually consider, like, going to pelvic therapy. It doesn't happen to everyone, but if it does happen to you.
It's good to get that looked at and addressed because, well, we are 911, right? You don't know what you're going to go on when you're going to go on. I had a brush fire the other day. I was on for 4.5 hours. It was nearly 85 acres that burnt because it was a very windy day. Yeah. And we just couldn't get a hold of it. It was so fast. It was so hot. Could you imagine, like, having those kind of issues and not being able to go to a bathroom? Like, yeah, it's just part of our job. But if you can mitigate those issues, you don't have to worry about it, you know? Yeah. Postpartum, I think another thing maybe we should chat about is just postpartum depression is hard.
Oh, yeah.
And just the feelings of having to go back to work after having children. I don't know how you felt about it, but it was really hard for me for a long time. My husband's awesome. He does so good with our kids, and like I have trusted childcare, but just having to leave my babies for 24 hours was a very big mind hurdle to get over. And I have super awesome people that work with me that I can talk about these things, but you need to talk about these things. And if it's overwhelming to the point where you can't sleep or where you feel like your stress is at the max all the time, you need to talk to somebody. Like, therapy is awesome, and being able to have somebody to validate those feelings and understand that it is normal to have those feelings, like, that's so important.
I love educating women on this, especially if you're a breastfeeding mom. You guys sit here and think you're producing Pitocin when you make milk. Milk, or Pitocin, is your love drug, right? And so when you dip in supply or you stop breastfeeding abruptly, you are dipping your happy hormones. So you can throw yourself into a postpartum depression, or you can just feel off for a little bit. I weaned my son pretty slowly, and I still felt it. Like, it was still felt, and I just felt off. And it just took a couple of period cycles, and then I was good. But if I didn't know that prior to going into it, I would have thought something was really wrong with me.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that I don't feel like women get education on afterwards. You have your 6-month appointment after, right, to clear you to go back to work. Yeah. You can see me doing air quotes right now. Women in our business cannot go back to work at 6 weeks easily.
No.
I didn't. I went back at like 13 or 14 both times because of the diastases recti as well. I had about almost a 2-inch separation of my abs.
Ooh.
And trying to do your job and like go through like working out and all this stuff, that's not easy to go back. And what if you had a structure fire your first day and you have to yank someone out of a building, like it's hard.
Yeah. And you can't just do regular ab workouts when you have that. You have to like actually know which workouts you're doing because you can actually make it worse.
Absolutely. There is one of my midwives at our midwife group, the Fertility and Midwifery Care Center here in Fort Wayne. Her name is Nikki, and she is a postpartum coach. Like, she helped me create workouts. I went to her, and we would go through, and I told her my job description and all the things I have to do, and she helped build something personalized for me to be able to help with that, with the ab separation and whatnot. She doesn't know this, but she was literally my saving grace when it came to coming back to work after my second, because I had my kids pretty close together. They were 17 months apart, so my abs, to be honest, were trash.
They were like, I hate you.
Yes, they were not doing well after the second. So I feel like I'm confident now after 15 months. It's been about 15 months that I've been consistently working on deep breath work, core work, focusing on everything ab driven, that I'm probably the strongest I've ever been in my life. But it's just taken her tools and consistency to be able to get back after that.
Yeah, and I don't want to deter any women for going into this field. We're just awareness. You want babies? Hey, take care of your fertility health, right?
Yes.
After you have a baby, you're going to need to do specialized workouts.
Yes.
And, if you plan on breastfeeding, just know that there is definitely going to be way more hurdles than the typical breastfeeding mother that has a normal 9-to-5 job, that has the ability to go off into an office and pump.
It's like the most beautiful thing ever, though.
Yeah.
Having children has been literally the best part of my life. Like, me and my husband and our family, like, oh my gosh. I love my job and career, but these boys, they got me.
I know.
But we always talk about, what if we had a girl,
Yeah.
50-50 shot, but what if we had a girl?
Yeah. Be like, what if we had a sassy little queen?
Oh my goodness. I couldn't even.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would love it, but also.
One last thing before we go. Do you have any book or podcast recommendations?
Oh goodness. I would have to send you her name. I listened to a midwife in my other life that I hope to have after my fire career. I would absolutely love to dive into the midwifery, care, delivery, home birth. I am all about it. And I will send you her podcast because she's very upfront and direct and very knowledgeable of that realm. And that's just something that really appeals to me right now.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing. And for everyone out there listening, I hope you can take a little bit of information if this resonates with you. Also like and subscribe to our channels. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, we're really wherever. Also, leave it better than you found it.